Joe Biden is now an Indian killer because of the ConocoPhillips Willow project. So speaking of,
Uh-huh.
I mean, and just the
And a
oops,
liar.
hit my
And,
mic
well,
again.
he
Yeah,
was always a liar, so.
that he already wasn't it with the endorsement of Deb Haaland opened up new lands for fracking when he promised. I remember the speech when he promised he wouldn't do that when he was campaigning, and
Mm-hmm.
is now opening up parts of Alaska for more oil and gas development. And people are like, oh, there's all these native people who endorse it. Deb Haaland endorses it. Mary Peltola, is that
Mm-hmm.
am I pronouncing Peltola? The new Yupik congresswoman who beat out like Sarah Palin and
Mm-hmm.
others, which was, I think, considered a victory at the time, but is now backing this. Again, this just plays into like the larger picture we're talking about, where it's like, are you not? I mean, yes, you're lying because you made this promise, but also, y'all, like climate change, like the earth is dying. Like, you can't do this. You just can't do this. You've been told by lots of different people, including lots of indigenous people. So Deb Holland and Mary Peltola, like, what's wrong with you?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have been told,
A lot of indigenous people
yeah.
in that area have talked about the receding ice, have talked about like literally looking up at the sky and it doesn't look the same because the poles, the magnetic poles, are shifting because of the melting polar ice caps. And they're literally saying our place in the universe is
Oh
changing.
God, that breaks my heart as an indigenous person. Right, and these it was an Alaskan bipartisan congressional delegation and a coalition of Alaska Native tribes and groups, many of whom are probably corporations, honestly, who hailed the drilling venture as a much needed new source of revenue and jobs. This was a CNN article. Uh, there again, right? And this has been pointed out. I mean, we're not saying anything new here by people who've been organizing against resource extraction and about climate change for a long time. You can't drink oil. You can't drink oil. Keep it in the soil. But also, like, you can't. We're like, this is crazy. You can't just keep focusing on these like short term gains, economic gains at the expense of like the survival of the planet. Like, that's lunacy. Again,
It is lunacy, and yeah, and it's been going on for so long. You just like I don't understand how people cannot see what we're doing now to the planet is basically signing our own death warrant, and climate change, water, global warming. It's all because we can't keep our drills out of the earth. Maybe you all could think about that.
the science. I mean, you can deny science, climate science, but it's pretty unequivocal. It's undeniable. So
Yeah.
it's like you can't like counteract like oil and gas, increasing oil and gas development with like the development of clean energy, which also relies upon, like you said, finite resources. You can't. It's like you can't just like switch and like trade and bargain. Which, even though people actually have tried to do that for a long time, the trade and bargain wasn't like the cap and trade, isn't
Mm-hmm.
that what it's called? Approach to climate change, where it's like, don't you
Mm-hmm.
just like, it's like finance capitalism. You're like passing around something that isn't even real. You're like trading carbon cards between countries,
Yep.
even though you're not actually reducing anything like material. It just lets capitalism keep doing what it's doing. Um, it's like turning carbon
Yep.
into a commodity. But anyway, I I think that this particular news is really it's just I mean, it's like devastating, but it's also like, what the actual fuck? I've always felt that way, but this one especially.
Yep.
Just SMH.
Yeah. And I just wonder too. I mean, we understand coming from communities that need jobs and that our people need well-paying jobs, not just to be sweeping up after people at the casino. But at the same time, I question whether this drilling project is actually going to benefit Native Alaskans, or whether it's just going to explode more man camps where workers come from out of state, earn bunches of money, abuse the environment, abuse women, and then, disappear. That's like never made any sense. They need the jobs, but if this is near an indigenous community, how many indigenous people are they actually going to hire?
Who knows? Who knows? They always promise jobs, and it's a different story when all is said and done. But resource extraction, by definition, is like a short-term thing. Like those jobs they're not like lasting jobs, because the resource will run out. Like you will drill all of the oil and then it will be done. And you may be like, oh, that's going to happen in 50 years. That's cool. Like, we'll just keep doing this until then. I'm fine with that. But those aren't like sustainable jobs if you think about jobs that, can stay in the community and help to develop a community for a long period of time. It's a very boom and bust industry. And also, like you said, the element of man camps, where there's plenty of research that shows, right, that the boom of resource extraction, especially when it's adjacent to indigenous communities, correlates with a boom in sexual and gender violence against Native women and girls. And Alaska has doesn't Alaska have like the worst rates of domestic violence and like MMIW in the whole country when it comes to Native women and girls?
And then how long before the drilling, extraction, whatever, pollutes the water supply and the already fragile Arctic ecosystem? I mean, we've already been barraged with photographs of starving polar bears, and how long? I mean, we know everything. Water is like universal. It evaporates, it goes up into the sky, and clouds take it somewhere else. So that poison that they pollute the water supplies with up there in Alaska is going to just destroy whatever fragile ecosystem they still have managed to keep. It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. And you're just like, wow, do we really have to fight again? Do we really have to point out again and like put people on the line who could possibly get charged with domestic terrorism just to say the same thing? That you already know all of this. You literally know all of this, and you're doing this willfully anyway. You're assholes, including the Native people who are participating in this. And this is on you. Like, history will show when, this is on you. Like, when there are things that happen as a result of this that cause even more harm, like, you are responsible for this. Probably no one's going to hold you accountable, but you will be responsible for it.
In 50 years, 50 years is 2 generations. Like, what the hell? I mean, does no one else take into account like the world that we're leaving for our descendants? And it doesn't matter if you have kids or if you're, if you don't have kids. Like, we're responsible for our communities, and we're responsible for our people. We're responsible for leaving them a world that hopefully is better than the one that we had. I don't see any of that happening. I mean, whatever happened to thinking about 7 generations on? And I'm specifically calling out, that the Native people in Alaska who are supporting this thing. Have you no shame? Like, do you realize what kind of a world you're leaving your descendants and your community that is yet to come? I mean, really, you don't care enough right now to protect the 7th generation.
It's like the people who support resource extraction are operating according to the 2nd generation principle. That most sacred 2nd generation. The second generation principle that's attached to capitalism. Like, well, like what? No, I was actually thinking a place in Colorado where I went to high school. My dad worked at a coal operated power plant for at that place for a long time. And the boom and bust there was 50 years. I think that power plant is closing soon, like in the next couple of years. And it opened up in the mid 70s. So that's about 50 years, right? It's a 50-year cycle. And that, I mean, the power plant was obviously the coal that was feeding the power plant that the power plant was then processing into electricity. That particular power plant fed power to like cities that grew massively in the last 50 years in the American West, places like Denver and Salt Lake City and stuff. So this was a very important generating station, essentially. But the coal strips, I remember the coal strips. You could see them from our house, like the as they were moving their way down a strip, and then they would fill it in when they got all the coal. The coal was gone, and then they would move on to the next strip. So it was strip mining, and like it's gone. That was a 50-year. That was the amount of coal there is finite. That was 50 years, and like pretty much everybody in the town where I grew up for, when I was a teenager and in middle school, like everybody had to rely on that place for a job. And it's like the mine is closing and the power plant is closing. And like that town is going to be completely derelict in a couple, it's already on its way. So anyway, all I'm trying to say is I'm just trying to provide a concrete example that I myself like grew up with in part. Like I actually literally saw as they were making their way through the coal deposits. Everybody could see it because it was on a hill you could see from town. And that was 50 years. They lasted for 50 years. 50 years ain't nothing. 50 years is a drop in the bucket. Sure, like you said, it sure as hell ain't the seventh generation kind of mentality. So obviously we're preaching to the choir and we all know this, but I don't know. It's just, again, it's just like astonishing what people are willing to do, what they're willing to sacrifice in a bad way. Like other people, like the well-being of the earth and of other people, that they're willing to sacrifice that for a few jobs for 50 years. I just realized I grew up in a coal town. Fascinating. How did I not know this? People talk a lot about those places as being in like West Virginia and Appalachia, and there are a lot of them, but there's a lot of them in the American West too.
Well, and like my brother-in-law worked at the Arizona Public Service coal-fired generating plant right up by Farmington for, I don't think it was 50 years, but let's see, he's probably 35, 40 years because he just retired a couple of years ago. And aside from the extractive industries, his health is terrible.
Yeah, the San Juan generating station in Farmington, that closed.
Yeah, that's the one.
Didn't it? It closed.
Yeah.
When did it close?
Yes.
It was retired in June. And that was commissioned. The very first unit opened in 1973. 50 years. Yeah. I'm just trying to provide concrete examples to give people the timeline of like what these kinds of projects actually entail. Yep. 50 years max.
Yep. And that provided, a decent living for people living in, that whole area, Fruitland, Kirtland, Shiprock, for 50 years. So 2 generations. But it also severely impacted their health. I mean, I don't think it was a healthy place to work.
And I guess like, I'm not like making a case against development for, our people deserve to have like, they need the resources to be able to have things like education and quality healthcare and housing and water infrastructure. Like, I'm not saying that I'm not an anti-development person. I used to be, but I think now I'm not so much anti-development, but it's, like your philosophy and your practice of development has to have like a very strong politics of that places like the well-being of the people and the well-being of the earth at the center. That it just has to, because otherwise, like, we're all just going to die by 2050. So climate change.
And that's a very indigenous perspective on things. That's why, you know, that's why the any development that takes place on Indian land, and yes, it's all Indian land, needs to be approached with an indigenous, you know, worldview, an indigenous cosmology. And there are industries, there are ways of creating economic development on our lands that will not harm our lands. It's just not the fast and easy and cheap way to do things, which is what capitalism wants. Capitalism wants instant rewards. And, you know, that's not going to happen. You need to have these, we've talked about these before too, just transitions from these destructive industries to industries that can be long-term and that can be beneficial and that don't harm the environment.
The Bien Vivir, right? Like the Pachamama Accords from 2011. We talk about this a lot. I think what is kind of being termed as eco-socialism and, you know, that milieu or whatever, that does actually provide, it's like an indigenous cosmovision is the basis for that interpretation of development. It is not an anti-development interpretation, but it is an indigenous centered. The origin of that approach to development comes from indigenous philosophy and indigenous worldview, as well as socialism, right? A certain also political orientation that's very much oriented towards the public good, right? Towards creating the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people, including the earth. So there are and there's actually countries like Bolivia who are actually trying to like implement this style of development. So it's not like these things don't exist in the world. So anyway, I wish like maybe our tribal leaders would go to those gatherings, you know, or just like have the bravery to implement that stuff. I hear your phone going off.
Oh, is that my phone? Dang it. I didn't even hear it. I was thinking about Bolivia and I was thinking about tribal leaders going to Bolivia and I was like, what would that look like?
It'd be wonderful. It's like, I don't know, just go kick it with some indigenous socialists and maybe think out of the box. Think out of the box of the U.S. tribal context, which is all that, because all that's on offer here is like colonialism and capitalism. That is all that is on offer here. So maybe there's another option, guys. Yeah. Besides drilling.
Yeah. Can we? Yeah. Besides drilling and casinos,
and like representation, like paltry crumbs from the powers that be. Maybe there's something different. Well, that's all I got.
I think that's all I got too. Trying to think of something happy to end this on. A happy thought. Thought of the day. Well, my happy thought is that it's literally been snowing and raining here for the last month, which is great. And thank the Creator for all of the moisture. And like my hyacinths in my garden came up because we had sort of, this is the springtime in the Rockies. So first you have false spring, then winter comes back, and then you have, we're just kidding, spring, and then winter comes back. So we're like on the second, are you kidding me? The hyacinths in the garden are covered in snow, like 4 inches of snow.
And every time those poor plant beings always fall for it. And then they just get throttled. Poor things.
Yep. And like the apricot trees in town were blossoming, which I just go, oh, you poor things. You didn't get the memo. Because we have one apricot tree in our front, and our apricot tree doesn't bloom until like May, because our apricot tree knows. Our apricot tree's like, nope,
listen,
I'm not falling for this
learned
again.
From millennia of experience. It's like, nope.
Yep.
Those poor little hyacinths, they're like,
so really cool.
And then they get burned.
But yeah, super grateful for all the moisture. And it's like the other thing that I have to kind of laugh about is we were literally told this was going to be a La Nina, So we were going to have no moisture this winter. It's a La Nina, and that means that the current from the Gulf and meets with something, and it means there's going to be very little snow. Like, really? It's been snowing for a month now. And we also got snow like in the very beginning of winter. So whoever does those predictions, they really need to like not do them anymore because they're constantly wrong. And I'm loving the moisture. We are now at abnormally dry rather than severe drought on that spectrum of water. And like, I'll take it. You know, yay for the trees and the bears and the critters. And
in California, I was reading because of the extreme moisture that they've received in multiple parts of that state. The drought has been reduced by 40%, I think is what they said. And if you looked at a map from prior to like last year, the drought zones that were in like extreme danger, you know, kind of conditions has reduced by a very significant percentage. Maybe that was the 40% reduction. I'm not sure, but it's like very significant. You know, like 36 feet on the top of Mammoth Mountain, 36 feet of snow. Like that's hardcore. But you know, where my parents live and here also, like we just crossed the threshold into the 8th or the 4th snowiest winter in recorded history here in Minnesota, Makoche. So, but let me tell you, it has not been easy. Like you said, I'm grateful, but also like, oh God, I don't want to shovel ice anymore. I don't want to chip any more ice. I don't want to get stuck in my alley. I don't want to fall. I don't want to be afraid walking out my door. Like, I don't want it to be. It was like -7 yesterday. I was like, it's like, please, Nahasan Shima, can you just bring spring?
Very grateful for the moisture creator, and please continue to send moisture, but could we have a little dryness?
Or like,
in
if
between?
you give us some dryness, can you like not rain and then go to -7 the next day? That'd be great.
Yeah.
Because that shit's crazy and dangerous. Yeah, super humbled this winter. Holy crap. This is a winter to remember. It's a winter to humble your ass. So, yeah. And I don't know if that's positive, but it's amazing. It's actually, I know that drought isn't, I mean, we might not ever have might not have winters like this for another decade. And, you know, drought will be like a thing. The drought hasn't gone away and it could reappear like that. Right? This seems exceptional, unless this is just going to be like this from now on in the winters, which it might happen. No one knows. It's so unpredictable, but
no one knows. For right now, just grateful for it. And I'm looking forward to spring. I'm really looking forward to being able to get out more. And
me too. I'm living for it. I now understand why people here live for the summer. I now understand it. So, well, I'm just living for it. Maybe when we record in 2 weeks, like, it'll be spring. That's a happy note to end on.
It could be this. That's a happy note. I won't say anything. I won't talk anymore about false springs. And
I feel like we've had like one false spring up here already, and it happened kind of like this week. So we have one more. People are like, winter lasts till May here. And I'm like, I have no doubt. So maybe our second false spring will happen in April and then like actual. But I bet you the snow up here doesn't melt everything until May for sure. But yeah, as long as it's like 40 degrees is like a heat wave. Like I started going outside in t-shirts during 40 degrees. Like I am acclimated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't wait for it to be 40 degrees every day.
Yay.
All right. Well, we're at an hour and a half. See, we always manage to break that 1 hour threshold, even when we're loopy.
We do.
Thanks everyone for listening to us talk for an hour and a half. Cool. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about, but we'll be back.
Yeah. We'll think of something.
All right. Thanks, folks. And just a reminder, please consider joining our Patreon if you aren't already a patron. And thank you to our patrons. We say this many times, but every penny and every dollar that you give to us via Patreon, like literally funds the entire organization, all of everything that Red Media does. So thank you so much. Till next time.